Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance. Welcome to the 91st week of UnSpun podcast. Yes, it is time for... I love the music, the UnSpun music. It makes me happy. I don't do the jokes that our former co-host did. No co-hosts anymore on UnSpun podcast. We have special guests each and every week, and I'm super fangirling over our next guest because he's not just one of the best, in my opinion, political columnists and journalists really in British Columbia, but also one of the co-authors of my favorite political book. Here to chat with us about all things political and other. We're going to unspin it all with the one and only Rob Shaw. Welcome to the program, Rob.
Thanks, Jody. Thanks for having me on.
Super excited to talk with you. Every time you and I get together in any forum, I always mention your book, A Matter of Confidence, the book that you wrote with Richard Zussman. Tell our listeners about your book.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting read now, given we're in the middle of an election, because it chronicles basically 10 plus years up to the results of the last election. So you can, take a read of it right now, learn a bit about John Horgan, his transformation into the premier that we've had the last 3.5 years, and then sort of compare what you're seeing on the campaign trail with the John Horgan that exists now, which is a little bit different. He's undergone another transformation in his partnership with the BC Greens, and a further transformation in turning on the BC Greens, his friends, and striking off on this election, and the tone changes and that type of thing. So I think it would give you a good, 10, 13, 14-year look at BC politics if you want. It's still on Amazon and available for order. So yeah.
A Matter of Confidence. I read it in 48 hours. I read it like a novel because it does have that unspun vibe to it. It has the behind the scenes. It's like that elevator ride where one party found out about a platform that was sort of torn off their idea. And it's like, well, now what are we going to do? And it really does a good back and forth, a bounce on who the human beings are behind the public servants or politicians that we see who face forward. Now, Rob, a little bit about you, because you and I remember when you told me your memory of first meeting me, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. Give people a little bit of a backstory on who is Rob Shaw.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Nanaimo and in a family household with 5 newspaper subscriptions. So I always thought the coolest thing in the world would be newspaper reporter. Very Clark Kent-esque, I guess. My daughter's name is Lois, so you can kind of put all of that together if you want. But I always wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and I went off and I started doing it at 16 at my local Ladysmith Chronicle newspaper, newsroom population 1 person, and went back there and did some summers there and writing as well. But I went to school at Ryerson in Toronto, and I remember in Ryerson, because you're in the middle of sort of downtown journalism, they'd sometimes bring guests to a pub night. And one night, it was Jody Vance at the local pub, and everyone went, and we sort of crowded into it. And I was, I don't know, some corner nursing a beer, listening to you talk about, sports journalism and, your career. And it was neat to meet people who were actually doing it, who took the time. I think it was you and George Strombolopoulos was another person who came out and took the time. And I always thought that was great. I try to talk to journalism students in BC too, because I don't, it's such a tough industry. It's so weird. And people who take the time to talk to you are, I always remember kind of thing. So that was a very early memory of mine of yours. You were at the height of breaking all of the glass ceilings and doing the sportscasting. So it was neat that you showed up for that.
I was so grateful for you telling that story. I loved going out to those Ryerson meet and greets or any BCIT here. I got to do one as well. And I always feel honored to be invited, to be honest with you. And when you first told me that story, it made me feel so fantastic. So I love that you're paying it forward. And I also appreciate sort of that the spark and inspiration of your want to do what you do. My story, very similar. Look at us, just a couple of British Columbians who thought, why not? Why not me? And when doing stuff like this, somebody listening right now who thought, maybe I could have done that. I'm telling you, and we can tell that person right now, you still can. There's
for sure.
always an opportunity. So an opportunity to also follow Rob Shaw on social media at Rob Shaw _ BC. Highly recommend following you, Rob. Your voice on social media is extraordinarily straight up, almost completely uncensored.
I take a lot of flack on social media. I mean, maybe we all take flack on social media. I don't know, but it's a very difficult platform. And as a columnist, I have some more leeway to kind of in real time try to fact check or BS check what different politicians are saying. And not everyone is a big fan of that, but it's how I've chosen to use the platform. It depends on it's more geared towards people who are just watching politics. It's not geared to the partisans. It's harder for them to sort of hear some criticism of whoever they happen to support. But I try to have fun on there. Today I've been doing all the campaign announcements using SpongeBob SquarePants GIFs, which I just decided to do. One day I did an entire, I think, throne speech using Cookie Monster GIFs because I don't know. I mean, every now and again, I can't keep up with Justin McElroy, who tweets out all of the most arcane, encyclopedic statistics. So I might as well use funny pictures, I guess. But
I think between you and Justin, the balance is perfect. You throw a little Baldry down the middle, some Zussman, some
Like there's a good collection of people out there.
Lisa Yuzda. I mean, we can go on and on, but the Linda Steele for that matter. Fabulous follows on Twitter, everybody. But keeping to the point of the politics, you and I could literally sit here and for the next 25 minutes talk only US politics. And I think that's something that is so prevalent right now, and why the Orca, where you're likely listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, why the orca.ca is so important to me, why I'm proud to be a part of the Resident Pod, and what I say to people in my elevator talk when they go, "What's that?" I say, it is the place that you're going to find information about politics where your tax dollars are actually being spent. And I love your column. It's a part of the FIN, the email that McLean K curates every weekday morning and is in your inbox by like 6:30 a.m. There's pretty much constantly a Rob Shaw piece included in that. The importance of knowing where we live and the politics of where we live from your perspective, Rob.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think for a lot of people, they view politics with fatigue. Nothing ever changes, no matter who's in power. They're out to blow your tax dollars, and cynicism is a big lack of engagement reason, I think, for some people. But we chug away every day at trying to just pick away at some of the context on the big announcements that happen and give a little bit more detail on what it means. And the longer I'm in this job, the more I can kind of find sort of threads, sort of through lines that promises that were made in an election that were resurrected from the last election. The Massey Bridge, for example, was just goes on and on and on. And comparing the renter's rebate in this election with the version that existed in the last election, and never came the $10 a day childcare plan, which changes the Liberals, when they're making different promises this election, how they did or didn't do that in the last election, and then did or didn't do that in their throne speech to try and stay in power. So I think that more and more, the longer I do it, I try to add some more context in, because I think that helps people kind of get a longer view of what's going on.
Oh man, the Massey Tunnel. You had me at the Massey Tunnel. One of my very first columns for the Orca was about the stress that I feel going through that tunnel. I grew up in Tsawwassen, so there were days that I went through that tunnel 6 times a day in trying to get back and forth from work, back and forth from friends, back and forth from just running errands here and there. And with every single time I go through there, I am more unnerved by it.
Are you worried there's going to be an earthquake while you're in there? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel that. Yeah.
An earthquake, or just the 60-year-old tube's gonna bust because it's built on sediment. This is not it's like the Patello Bridge, right?
Right.
You got to close it during a windstorm. Let's fix that. There are a bunch of things that I think are prioritized sort of out of order because they don't fit into the strategic political plan, like you say, that makes everyday citizens like you and I go, okay, so what are we doing now? Like, how
Yeah.
is this relevant? How does this work? Like, why are we now going to see the Liberals and the NDP fight over the Surrey Police Department? Well, because you don't get the Premier's office without winning Surrey.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's important to sort of understand the battlegrounds in BC to understand why things get announced the way they do. There's 9 ridings in Surrey. That's more than the entire northern half of British Columbia. Surrey politics are extremely complicated. They, bleed over from municipal, and there's different ethnic politics involved. There's everyone's trying to understand Doug McCallum, the promises he made to get elected as Surrey's mayor a couple years ago. Were they representative of people? Did people want those things, or were they voting for him? And have they changed their minds since then? And you see in this election, the parties, both the Liberals and the NDP, not quite sure. And they've been trying for a while to stay out of it. The NDP desperately don't want to get into the issue of whether they should get involved in the police department change in Surrey. They have gone out of their way in this election to say, no, it's a municipal issue. All we did was review it, which is not true. The province has a lot of authority to approve that municipal police department. Wide latitude to have denied it if they didn't want to do it. And the NDP, for political reasons, thought they should approve it. The Liberals have kind of seized on that as an opportunity to really differentiate themselves by saying, we would have a referendum on this, we would pause it and take another look. They don't know, and we don't know if that is really what people want in Surrey. We think possibly, maybe, but Doug McCallum was elected with such a wide margin on that promise, a very specific promise for a new police force. It gives a lot of politicians pause on what exactly is going on in there. So it's an interesting taxi ride hailing, bridge tolls from the last election, Surrey school portables, which haven't been eliminated. These would be issues we would be talking about in a normal election with an incredible amount of importance. And we're still not quite sure if all those little individual Surrey issues are still swamped by COVID and by the pandemic, or are people paying attention to them, and where do they land? So it's interesting for sure.
Rob, speaking of COVID, what has it been like from a columnist perspective, from a print media perspective, for you to cover a global pandemic and how it hits this province?
Well, prior to the election, it was difficult because we went into this period of, for the first little bit of the pandemic, just trying to accurately report what the public health officer was saying. And in politics, you often find an opposing view that criticizes whatever is announced by whatever party is in power. And the opposition will say, for whatever reason, that's not good. Whatever that promise was, is that we could do better. And for probably the better part of 2 to 3 months, we didn't have anyone saying that about what Dr. Bonnie Henry was announcing. So our job became more about finding little details, asking questions that people were concerned about, and reporting what she said. Then, since then, we've moved into a lot more criticism of some of the decisions that she and the government have made, confusion over contradictory rules that don't quite make sense, the lack of public data that has concerned some people, especially parents, when it comes to school outbreaks. And then the politics got put back in, and now we find ourselves in an election where COVID is a football, and the NDP are saying, oh no, the Liberals would cut healthcare spending, and the Liberals are saying, no, the NDP didn't really do a great job on economic recovery. They did okay on healthcare because of Dr. Bonnie Henry, but their economic recovery plan is ridiculous. And so COVID is kind of unfortunately been politicized again, but I guess that's politics back as usual. But it was very odd to go through that period. And also now in an election where you can't be on the leader's bus, there's no campaign, there's no rallies, you can't meet the candidates in person.
You can't pull them outside for a little one-on-one.
No, it used to be that you would get on the leader's bus and you would travel the province, and they would have a theme song, like Gordon Campbell had Bryan Adams' Can't Stop With This Thing We Started, and show up and there'd be a big crowd, the bus shows up, and you meet the candidates, everyone's cheering, it's on live at 6 o'clock on the news. And eventually you get a sense of momentum. What are the crowds like? How are people engaging? No ability to do that. Most of the leaders have morning press conferences and then go home, or spend their day sitting there doing Zoom calls or virtual rallies with just a few hundred people the most hardcore partisans are the ones dialing into virtual rallies. And it's very difficult for campaigns to portray a sense of momentum, because I think they want, everyone wants to create the appearance of a movement that you would like to be part of, that this incredible kind of like social or economic change, and get out there and vote because everyone's doing it, and this could be the Barack Obama moment. And without crowds and rallies, they can't convey that. And luckily, I guess people are pretty much voting right now with their mail-in ballots, but it's
Right.
a
How
totally
many
different
mail-in
dynamic.
ballots? Was it like 517,000 or some number?
Yeah, it was
like
almost
that?
600,000 ballots now. Yeah. I mean,
I voted by mail, I have to admit. So, I mean, and that proves to me that, I haven't seen the leadership debate.
yeah.
I'm a decided voter, I guess. Well, yeah, because I voted.
Did you find it weird to write the candidate's name in the mail-in ballot being blank?
I did.
Yeah.
But I did see a lot of noise in the days just prior to. It's like, well, the former co-host here, who is now running in Vancouver Fairview, where the two running against each other, the two main NDP and Liberal leaders, hopeful MLA candidates, running against one another, have the same first name. So you can't just put in someone's first name here. You can put, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, you can put in the party, or the full name of the person in your riding, right? Or the party's leader's name, right?
You can't put the party's leader's name in. And John Horgan got that wrong, which led to massive confusion. He said, just write John Horgan on your ballot. No, you can't do that. And it's only the name of the candidate or the name of the party. And that is going to be a big question, because maybe we're probably on track to almost 1 million mail-in ballots. An enormous percentage, well over a third of the votes. And they're not going to be counted till 13 days after the election, because they're special ballots. And then the question is going to be, with all these ballots, were they properly scrutinized? What happens if you misspell the candidate's name? Who
missed the memo on not just putting the hopeful premier's name in there?
That's right, yeah. What if you put a little heart above an I on a candidate's name?
Oh, no, not the heart, Rob.
That's right. But the overarching rule is intent. Can someone determine the intent of the voter when they're voting? And sometimes judges get brought in to make the intent. If you misspell someone's name, or the E looks like an O, or you've got part of the last name, is it still clear who you intended to vote for? It's going to be very contentious if you have ridings like in the last election, where there's just a few dozen votes that determine the outcome. So that story has yet to be fully told, and we're going to be talking about it well after Election Day, I think.
On the days to come, days and weeks to come. Let's talk municipal politics just a little bit, because I'm finding it difficult to stomach the lack of priorities. And this is not a shot against city staffers. This is not a shot against council people. This isn't even really a shot against specifically the mayor, but everybody collectively together needs to reevaluate where our priority systems are, because what is happening, and the park board is really my target, I guess, a lot of the times, because what is happening at Strathcona Park and what was happening at Oppenheimer Park prior to is an absolute nightmare. That we are seeing such inaction, and it's only going to get darker and rainier, Rob.
Oh yeah. No, it is a situation where governments, like the local government and the Parks Board, like to blame the province for not having the right housing resources. The province blames Ottawa for not having enough housing funding, and it all goes around in a circle. It's a really fascinating issue, because in this election, the Liberal leader, Andrew Wilkinson, has tried to make the Strathcona Park, and by extension, the Crab Park encampment, and then before that, the Oppenheimer Park encampment. He's tried to make it an issue by saying to people, you don't feel safe there, and it's okay not to feel safe there. It's okay to be concerned about the thefts, the violence, the crime, the drug use, and ask for an answer from your government on that. And he has promised so far to end tent cities. Not entirely sure how. He hasn't got into the details of that. He's promised more resources for mental health experts to accompany police to calls, for more integrated police units, for more prosecutors. He's trying to thread a very interesting and extremely difficult needle between law and order and public safety on these tent cities, and also appear compassionate, not cruel in
Right.
saying that people still need help. I don't know if he's landed that. I don't think he has. I think he's tried, and there is some ground there to because I think there are even progressive New Democrat voters who walk by Beacon Hill Park in Victoria or Strathcona Park in Vancouver and go, I'm not safe here. Right. Whatever we've done as a government is not enough. And there's ground for the Liberals there, but I don't think they've quite seized on it. They've tried 3 times. I assume they're going to try again in the election, and maybe they seize upon it in the right way at some point.
I just hope somebody, as you said, has the compassionate piece, whomever can bring some relief here. Certainly, I think the park board owns a massive piece of this puzzle in allowing it to expand to the degree it has. The mix of bad actors and crime element with activists that also have a large piece of impoverished people that are desperate with nowhere to go. I mean, the SROs are shut down and condemned. The places and spaces that have been given all the tax breaks and the zoning, golden egg, whatever you want to call it, incredibly wealthy people have allowed these spaces to fall into such disrepair that we are down places. We're negative spaces right now and throwing $1 million a day into the downtown east side, and it's just like, you might as well be burning it. Yeah. It's just not working. So that's my kind of feeling when I see a press release saying basically that Mayor Stewart has already revving up his campaign engine and he's targeting the NPA. Is that because Ken Sim has decided that, or has shared his intent to run, I guess, as an independent? Is that why this is starting to heat up in 2020 mid-pandemic when a municipal election isn't until 2022?
The timing of it is very perplexing, but I think there's a lot. I think, Kennedy-Stewart is, and depending on your view, quite rightly, facing a lot of heat for being unable to tackle some of these issues. Gregor Robertson, remember, he promised to end homelessness, and that it turned into a bit of a problem for him. And Kennedy-Stewart has promised to do much better with those encampments. And they just, if you went into Strathcona and pushed everyone out, it would just be another camp somewhere else. And I think that has,
or Yaletown, because that's what we've seen.
Caught up with Kennedy-Stewart now. He realizes, and people are realizing that, and he's having to campaign early on it. In politics, people often look for the easy solution. We talk about safe drug supply quite often, which makes perfect sense and is completely needed. It is not going to solve everything.
No.
We talk about decriminalizing small amounts of possession, which is needed. And yes. Ottawa is very slow on that. And John Horgan has talked about moving in a made in BC. That's needed. More mental health resources, more treatment beds, fewer wait times. That's all. Yeah. It's a very complex issue. And I think one legitimate criticism on the NDP is that by creating the Ministry of Mental Health and putting so much effort into it and still not making the problem any better, demonstrably it is worse at this point.
I agree with you, Rob. And to unspin that a little bit, because I fully agree with everything you just said. So for somebody tuning in going, but at least they're trying with that ministry, it's like they're trying to find out the way to fix everything before they push one domino. There is no way to do that. And we need to save lives. More people have died in British Columbia of opioid drug overdoses than all of COVID-19 monthly. It's crazy, the numbers. You see Dr. Henry literally in tears when she speaks to this, and she's calling for all of those things. Like, why are we not listening? Why are the politicians, what are they afraid of? Is there such backlash from a political standpoint in doing some of those things, the decriminalization or the making accessible of these drugs to people who are addicted and going to get them and use them in a dangerous way if they aren't available, especially in a pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think the problem with the NDP has been that their Ministry of Mental Health, Judy Darcy, who's been put in charge of this for 3 years, didn't really have any power and didn't really have any money. And so every time she came up with a solution, she needed to go get Adrian Dix, the health minister, to sign off on it. And that I know John-Horgan promotes that fact the ministry existed as some way that things have been better, but I have not seen that on the ground. The other issue is some of these things have to come through Ottawa, and BC has chosen to wait for Ottawa rather than doing it itself. And you do see in this election some calls that, look, if Ottawa's not going to do these things, we will do them, even if they're illegal, even if we're not waiting for the criminal code to change, the province will just do it. And so I think the NDP have struggled. And ministers, it was interesting to watch people like people who spent their entire lives as MLAs fighting on the social poverty and addictions and homelessness issues become cabinet ministers for 3.5 years, try to enact the changes, not do a particularly fantastic job in solving the problem, and then retire. Right. And I think so, there was a bit of a wave through the NDP and their cabinet minister resignations. People who retired, Claire Trevena, transportation critic for many, many years, became minister, did not do a great job. It's a little bit of that occurred. That it's a lot harder to find solutions than it is to complain. And
right.
So
I'm good at complaining.
Wrestled with that.
I'm very good at complaining. But I also am looking for a little bit more prioritization. Like if we made it so we couldn't get to the ones that are our pet projects before we solve some of these, I think some of these would be solved first. You know, what I mean?
Everything has to be a massive 10-year plan.
No.
Sometimes you just, and we often don't talk about the treatment system for mental health and addictions right now and how broken it is. There's not enough beds. And there are empty beds you can't access. That too. There are private beds that are too expensive. There's not enough. And you know what the thing that always got me about that ministry is that there is a public overdose crisis, and no one's disputing that. But there is also a mental health crisis going on for people who are not homeless or suffering from a larger addictions issue. I think all of us have had mental health issues during this COVID pandemic. And if you or I know from having done it myself, try to get access to mental health help, you end up in this enormously complicated 6-month wait period. And that has not improved at all under the current government, despite what they said they were going to do. And because, I guess, of the overdose crisis, that just hasn't been a priority. So at some point, you have to shift to be able to do more than one thing at a time. And not everything has to be a big plan. Just start knocking things off, and they haven't been able to do that yet.
So Rob, can you believe it? That's how fast this podcast flies by. I know. Already? We've only just begun, but I've only got a couple minutes here, but I want to ask you, because we are the week before, as of right now, it's the Thursday before Thanksgiving. You off the top said, Nanaimo boy, big family, 5 newspapers delivered to your house, 5 subscriptions. It's a big family. What are your plans for Thanksgiving when dealing with a pandemic?
Small bubble. So I think I will have Thanksgiving dinner here in Victoria with my daughter, Lois, who's 12, and she's big into cooking now. So we'll spend some time learning how to cook the turkey together and that type of thing. But it's not a year where I am going to go to my grandfather, who's 95, in a care home. I haven't seen him since the pandemic started, and you have to be very careful about that. So it's different for everyone. And Halloween's going to be really different too. I can't imagine. I don't know. Do you think your kids are going to enjoy trick-or-treating the way that has been recommended by public health officers, with tongs and a baking sheet and a big tube to deliver the candy?
I think that's very inventive. And while we all do look at each other and say, well, at least this is just for now and not forever, because we will get to the other side of this. But for me personally, I checked, because I've got a 12-year-old. Mine's about to turn 13. So he's in grade 8 now. And I'm like, Bud, what do you think, Halloween? And he's like, I'm kind of past trick-or-treating and before house parties. So he's like, I'm cool with just staying home and gaming. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah. Well,
but as a family, I wrote about this in the Orca, because I've got a lot of friends. My family, not so much. Grateful that my folks are very aware of where we're at in this pandemic and how the need to keep things tight is so important. My dad is in a care home with Alzheimer's, and I'm his essential visitor. So my bubble is like crazy tight. So a no from me doesn't come with a lot of peer pressure, because I just can't. But people who are making that decision and feeling the peer pressure from somebody who's saying, but we're just going to do one thing normal this year and it's going to be Thanksgiving. Don't feel that peer pressure. Read the column. It's at the orca.ca. It's the middle. It comes out every Wednesday. So that's my column this week. Just to try and have, to quote Dr. Henry, the kindest, calmest, and certainly the safest possible Thanksgiving and Halloween looking ahead. But we could do like a Halloween Zoom. Are you going to get dressed up?
I don't think so. No, I don't. No, I don't think so.
No.
But I'll be interested. I will put candy aside somehow and try to figure out a way to deliver it on Halloween. I just haven't quite figured that out yet. And
I'm going to decorate the hell out of the place. I'm going to put up a sign that says, come back next year. The big candy bars next year.
Oh, the real candy bars.
Yeah, let's do that.
Oh, man, you're going to have a lineup outside the house.
That's right. While they last.
Right.
Thank you, Rob Shaw.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's always fun talking to you.
Let's talk again soon. That's Unspun. See ya.